Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Truth. I'm John Gordon, and we're going to tell you the truth today. And we're going to start with an exchange that occurred in the Georgia State Senate earlier this week. Now, in about 2006, the then Speaker of the House of the Georgia House of Representatives passed a law that he authored. The House and the Senate, and passed a law, and the governor signed it. But David Ralston, then the late David Ralston, then Speaker of the House, authored the bill. And the bill contained the provision that if you were a practicing lawyer in a court of law and your legislative duties prohibited you from making an appearance in a case in which you were representing a defendant, that you could ask the court to postpone the hearing. The bill passed, and Mr. Ralston was a criminal defense lawyer, and he used that provision as many as 1,000 times to postpone the trials of defendants that he was representing. Senator Colton Moore of Northwest Georgia appeared in the well of the Georgia Senate on Thursday of this week and made a very passionate case for why former Speaker and the late David Ralston should not be honored by placing his name on the building, a new building in the University of Georgia university system. Let's go to clip one now and watch Senator Moore.
That we should think about as we vote for this resolution. Because this body is about to perpetually memorialize, in my opinion, one of the most corrupt Georgia leaders we'll ever see in our lifetimes. I first remember learning about a girl named Haley when I served in the chamber across the way. Haley was brutally raped, sodomized in her living room by a man her family trusted. That man was Jason Brothers, and he hired Speaker David Ralston as his attorney, not to defend him, but to protect him from justice. You see, for nearly a decade, this case rocked on, and Haley became terminally ill, never seeing justice. Her family once walked in on her in a bathtub with blood as she contemplated suicide. And you probably say, Senator, well, that's just one case. Where can you go with that? But no, there were several more. There was a case of a lady who lost her daughter in her arms as she bled out because a man was driving drunk. Destroyed the woman's family. But she wasn't able to get justice because the man charged with the DUI hired Speaker David Ralston as his attorney. You see, there was a man named Derek Key who for 10 years delayed cases after molesting a 14-year-old child being protected by David Ralston. Now, how did David Ralston do this? We heard about him being chairman of Judiciary Non-Civil. Well, back in 2006, there was a bill called Senate Bill 503. The man created the legislative leave and then profited off of it, making hundreds of thousands of dollars protecting people from justice. You see, the truth is hard to hear.
Senator,
Mr. President,
we got decorum, rules here in this chamber. And I think you've made your point, sir. So if you could just go ahead and wrap up, we'd be appreciative.
So Senator Moore was not those words were not welcomed in the Georgia Senate yesterday, nor were they welcomed in the Georgia House. But the fact of the matter is, Senator Moore told the truth. And sometimes the truth is very hard to hear. Let's go to cut 2.
More and more of them. No court, less work. He had an operation. He was running an industry, Mr. President, and all he was using was a simple form letter, sending it to the court, referencing the code section that the man created in 2006.
Senator, not the time or place. Not the time or place.
Mr.
Go ahead
President,
and yield the well, Senator.
at your request.
Thank you, Senator.
So moments later, this exchange then occurred across the hall in the Georgia House of Representatives.
Looking on at home. A member of the Senate, the senator from the 53rd District, took it upon himself to go to the well of the Senate, make some of the vilest comments that you can make about a good man. His comments impugn the integrity of my dear friend, and we all know they were not true.
They were not true? Really? That's what you believe? 5 years ago, this was a major local news story. David Ralston's activism on behalf of his clients, using a loophole that he created, that he profited by, was the subject of intense local media coverage. Here's a clip from WXIA TV in Atlanta.
When he's not presiding over the State House of Representatives, David Ralston is a criminal defense attorney in the North Georgia mountains. In Gilmer County alone, records we found showed Ralston requested 202 postponements for court appearances in the cases of 19 criminal defendants, each time citing a Georgia law allowing him to say his duties in the legislature took precedence. Critics say the delays have created hardships for the alleged victims in the cases.
I am an advocate for justice, and I can't imagine what many of these victims probably feel, not seeing justice being served.
The cases we saw ranged from assaulting a police officer to child enticement. In the case of Derek Key, charged 10 years ago with enticing a child and furnishing obscene material to a minor, Ralston requested 34 postponements for calendar calls, plea hearings, and jury trials, while Key has been out of jail on bond.
So it was true. It was true that David Ralston, while he was a member of the Georgia legislature and Speaker of the House, created a loophole which would allow him to indefinitely postpone cases being brought against criminal defendants. And he didn't do it just once. He didn't do it twice. He didn't do it 3 times. He did it multiple times over a long period of time. And as Senator Moore said, justice denied here constitutes justice being denied everywhere, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Not an exact quote, but that's the gist of it. So what we learned yesterday is that cronyism, friendships, the fraternity mean more than the duty to serve the public interest. Let's watch clip 4.
I'm going to ask the doorkeeper of this house, Corey Mulkey, no time in the future will the senator from the 53rd be allowed to come into that any room or any property of the Georgia House.
So that's John Burns, the current Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives. I want you to write him a letter and tell him, hell no, Colton Moore is not going to be banned from the House of the or the floor of the Georgia House of Representatives. He is an elected official. His constituency sent him there. If they don't like what he's doing, they can turn him out at the polls. But in the meantime, You can't let your friendship with the late David Ralston cloud your judgment and memorialize and honor him by placing his name on a building when, in Senator Moore's opinion, and I share it, he was not worthy. He breached his oath. He breached his duty. He used the power of his office to benefit himself financially and to deny victims justice. And I am very sorry. I am very sorry, Lieutenant Governor Jones and Speaker John Burns. You're dead ass wrong, as are all of your colleagues who piled on Colton Moore yesterday. Now, I've met Colton Moore one time. I am not speaking out of some blind loyalty to someone that I barely know. I have had him on The Truth with John Gordon, and guess what? We're going to have him back on next week. But I am so sick and tired of people who we put our trust in denying their responsibility to the people who put them there and instead realigning it with their friends and cronies and making decisions that are based on alliances rather than the oath. That's the problem that we've got. And that's what we're seeing playing out in the Georgia legislature right now. I like Burt Jones. I think he was in a very difficult position. Can you imagine? I mean, when you watch that clip of Colton Moore addressing his colleagues, we only see him in the camera, but you can feel the tension in the room. You can sense the negative body English that Colton Moore was experiencing as he delivered those tough words of truth. I never met David Ralston. I don't have a single bone in the world to pick with him, other than I have read about him. I have heard about him. I've been informed of the heavy-handedness with which he ran the Georgia legislature. That's not terribly unique. I think speakers of bodies like that are frequently accused of heavy-handed tactics. You can look at the United States Senate. It won't be long before we don't have to put up with George McConnell much longer, who seems to align himself with Democrats more than Republicans a good percentage of the time. And the Democratic leader is just absolutely horrible. He's trying to interfere with an election in Israel by telling the people of Israel that Netanyahu needs to be removed and a new prime minister established in Israel. What possible business is that of his? So anyway, I'm really disappointed that the lieutenant governor silenced Senator Colton Moore yesterday or Thursday, would not let him conclude his prepared remarks. I am very disappointed that the Georgia Senate passed almost unanimously the resolution placing David Ralston's name on the building that honored him. I'm sure that David Ralston had many, many, many redeeming values. And there is no question that he served our state for a long period of time. And as I said, I'd never met the man. I don't really have any insight into who he was or what he was about. But what I do know is that Colton Moore was telling the truth. And the truth has a place in our lawmaking processes. Don't you think? Can we get back to could everybody, this is what I yearn for. This is what I yearn for. I want every living American, liberal, libertarian, conservative, Democrat, independent, Republican, no name, whoever you are, wherever you are, that we all join hands and just come to one simple agreement. And that is that we will be governed by and directed by the truth. That's what I want. I think it's reasonable. I think that is where we should place our top priority and value, right up there with patriotism for our country. This country will be so much better off. We will be so much better off if people, especially our elected officials, will simply agree to that simple premise that the truth will guide all of our decision making. Speaking of which, the truth seemed to have little value in Judge Scott McAfee's courtroom. I am very sorry, but you, sir, need to grow a pair. You need to drink some courage. I don't know where you're going to find it. I'm not talking about liquid courage. I'm talking about real courage. I'm talking about standing up for the rule of law. So Judge McAfee is appointed by Brian Kemp to the Superior Court of Fulton County. I'm sure that he was very disappointed when the case against the Fani Willis 19 landed in his court. He hadn't been a judge a full year yet. I think he's been on the bench 9 months. And then he gets one of the most celebrated cases and most renowned cases in America today. So he's been presiding over this case. Well, lo and behold, one of the defendants finds out that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade have been having this little tryst. Nathan Wade and Fani Willis want you to believe that their romance did not start until November of 2021. In their mind, if they can get you to believe that, then there was no inducement for her to have hired Nathan Wade back in 2019 when she hired him as a special prosecutor in her office. Only problem is Ms. Yurty, a lady that worked for Ms. Willis, came forward and said, oh no, Fani and Nathan, they've been an item since 2019. Everybody knows it. And then a prosecutor in Cobb County came forward and substantiated back Ms. Yurty's claim. And then a law professor, Manny Aurora, came forward, said he was aware of their relationship. And then there was still a third person who said that they were romantically involved as early as 2019. Judge McAfee evidently doesn't care if people come into his courtroom and lie, especially when that person used to be their boss, as was the case with Fani Willis. Judge McAfee worked for Fani Willis for 4 years in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. This is 23-page decision is the worst garbage I have ever read. It is the saddest reflection on American judicial integrity, ethics, values I have ever seen in my life. You should be ashamed of yourself, Judge McAfee. And worse, all three of you should be disbarred. You should be disbarred. Fani Willis should be disbarred. Nathan Wade should be disbarred because they came into your courtroom and lied, and you know it, and I know it, and everybody who watched that proceeding knows it. And Manny Aurora knows it. Ms. Yurty knows it. And the prosecutor in Cobb County knows it. Anybody with a brain, 2 ears, and 2 eyes know that they came into your courtroom and they lied. What we also know and have ample evidence of is that Fani Willis hired Nathan Wade and paid him 6 times as much more than the other highest paid special prosecutor that she hired to go after Trump and the 18 other defendants, which is a completely made up lawsuit based on RICO, which was designed to go after members of the mob. And now Fani Willis has committed the same crimes that she's accusing the 19 defendants of committing. It is pure projectionism. And we've got Dr. Carol Lieberman standing by. We're going to go to her in just a minute, and we'll ask her what she thinks about projectionism and whether that's at play in this case, if she has been watching it. But Judge McAfee writes the weakest opinion that I have ever read. He as much as acknowledges that they lied. He as much as acknowledges that they had a financial interest. And then, don't forget, Fonnie Willis and Nathan Wade went on trips. Oh, but she reimbursed him for her half of those trips out of her cash stash that she maintained in her house. Does she have any records? Does she have any receipts? Does she have any witnesses? Does she have any corroborating evidence whatsoever? None. Then she goes and makes a talk at in a house of worship in Atlanta a month ago. She plays the race card, and in doing so, she taints the future jury pool. Everything she's done violates the canons of ethics. Everything they've done justify her with removal. But why did Judge McAfee not remove her? Where did the little wimpy boy judge who couldn't summon the courage to do the right thing? It's like we've got Bonnie and Clyde. We caught them red-handed. We're going to punish Clyde, but Bonnie's going to go free. She gets to stay on the case with her witch hunt and her political persecution, which is another problem with her indictment. This case has been brought for her political advantage. It is a political case. It's not a legal case. And Judge McAfee is letting her get away with it. His former boss and the guy who appointed him, Governor Kemp, is perfectly content to sit back and get a bag of popcorn and watch it all play out and do nothing. There is a glimmer of hope. The district attorney judicial committee that was enacted last year, that as part of the law, the Supreme Court of Georgia had to promulgate rules that would that this commission would operate under. But the Supreme Court declined to issue the rules. Therefore, the case or the commission couldn't be constituted. It lacked the fundamental requirements necessary to create the commission. As I understand it, there is a bill pending right now that will recreate that commission and will remove the obstacle of having the Supreme Court enact the rules. So maybe this commission will get appointed. Maybe somebody somewhere will step up, have the courage to do what is right, and stand up to the angry black woman, and don't be afraid of being called a racist. That's a label that nobody wants and that everybody runs from, and they cower and they shrink in their duty for fear of ever being called racist. And there's one other little tidbit that Judge McAfee might be considering in making the decision that he made. Oh, he's up for election, his first real election in just 2 months. And he knows that if he were to remove Fonnie Willis from the case, that he would probably alienate a large segment of Fulton County voters. Those are all of the black voters and liberal voters in Fulton County who are seemingly okay with a public official taking public funds to go on 6 vacations or 5 vacations in 6 months, probably using money that was funneled to her lover out of the coffers of the Fulton County taxpayers. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. And it's why we lose faith in government. The fact that the Georgia House and Senate will put the name of someone who displayed horrible ethics in the commission of their public office, and they'll honor him by putting his name up on a building. The fact that a judge who has all the evidence that he needs to disqualify a public official, a district attorney, who is acting out of political prejudice, and will allow her to continue when all of the evidence suggests that he should not, and the law. So I don't know where this is going to end. Hopefully somebody at the Georgia bar is watching. I doubt it. They're pretty woke, as I'm told. So I don't know how we get justice. I don't know how we get things back on the rail. But what I do know is that it has horrible consequences. Judge McAfee, your decision has horrible consequences. You just let everybody know, whoever comes into the Superior Court in your courtroom, that they can lie and get away with it. You just let every official in the Fulton County government know that if they've got a title, they can do whatever they want without being held accountable for their deeds, which violate the law. And the members of the Senate and the House who chose to honor somebody who abused their authority and exceeded their authority and creating a loophole that they could then profit on, and now we're going to honor them by putting a name up on their building, on a building for them. Really? And then you're going to stand at the lectern, Mr. Speaker, in the Georgia House, and tell the people of Georgia that what Colton Moore said was not true? That's the lie. You're lying while you're accusing someone else of lying. All right, let's go to Dr. Carol Lieberman. She is the terrorist psychiatrist. Is that right? I think I get it wrong, but she's
terrorist therapist and America's psychiatrist.
There we go. Thank you, Carol, and welcome back to The Truth. So happy to have you back. You're watching what's going on, right?
Oh, I watched it, even though it was making me nauseous. At the very least, Fannie Willis's comportment, when she was testifying in this sort of histrionic, borderline personality type way, that in itself, not that you decide if a person is guilty or you make a judicial decision based on that, but for all the people who still keep her in this job, that is so unbecoming to a lawyer, to a DA. I mean, she looked ridiculous. She shouldn't be in that position to begin with. Now, in addition to that, of course, I agree with everything that you said. I actually tweeted after that came out. I wrote, breaking, judge ruled Fannie Willis can stay on case if she fires Nathan Wade, or she can back out and let him stay, like she'd ever do this.
Yeah, we can put you through a meat cleaver, or you can just get rid of your ex-lover from the case. Let me think about that. Which one am I going to pick?
Right. Both committed perjury. They should be fired, disbarred, and charged criminally. Outrageous.
Totally. And the fact is, it just makes people so cynical, and it causes us to lose faith in the institutions that we once revered and I always felt like the courts were a place where you could seek refuge, where you could right wrongs, where you would have someone that would defend you, have your back if they followed the rule of law.
Yes.
No more.
Well, I work, and I've been working for quite a while, as a forensic psychiatrist and expert witness. So I go into courts and testify, criminal courts and civil courts, quite a lot. And I must say it has been disappointing to see some of the judgments that are made, or sometimes it's not even when I'm there, but just cases that I inherit or, get to deal with at some point in their legal struggles. And I hear about, especially like in custody cases and things like that, where judges make decisions based upon their own experience or based upon lies that one of the parents tell them, or, it is very unfortunate, but it's the loss of confidence in the judicial system and in the legal system. I mean, well, of course, that's the political system, the media, all of that is contributing to a huge amount of depression in America. There are all these studies about how mental illness is rising, especially depression and anxiety. Well, it's because we feel like there's nobody you can trust.
Well, I have to tell you that I make a conscious decision most days to turn off the television and stop watching the news, because it makes me aggravated. It makes me sad. It makes me frustrated. All the unhealthy emotions that we all have to deal with every day seem to really come to me largely through the news and the television. So I get what you're saying. So what was the term that you used when you were describing Fani Willis when she was on the witness stand? Did you say that she exhibited a dual personality, or you had some term of art?
A borderline personality.
Borderline personality. Define that for us. What does that mean?
A borderline personality is someone who, well, first of all personality disorders come from childhood. From dysfunctional families. And of course, we saw her father testify for her, basically, just supporting all the lies that she was telling. But I don't know, maybe he was supportive as a father. But anyhow, no, but it really comes from various traumas and so on as a child. And in particular, things related to abandonment. And what the people are like, the symptoms that they have, they're terribly afraid of any kind of abandonment. So it's very difficult for them to have romantic relationships, for example, because they're always worried that the person is going to abandon them. Of course, one way to deal with that is paying them a lot of money, hiring them and paying them a lot of money so that they don't abandon you. But also sort of a very rapid emotional changes, loving someone one minute and then hating them, emotional lability, volatility, things like sometimes in severe states, sometimes there can be psychotic features. It's the worst. In a sense, it's the worst kind of personality disorder that you can have. Johnny Depp and Amber, she had a borderline personality disorder.
So what are the traits of someone with borderline personality disorder?
Well, that's what I was describing. Fear of abandonment, hot and cold personality, hot and cold feelings towards people and towards things. Sometimes some psychotic, if you're in a serious state, some psychotic symptoms, lying, basically, not feeling any difficulty lying.
Well, and a judge, the job of a judge is to assess the credibility of a witness. And I think that there was plenty of opportunity to evaluate Fani Willis as a witness, Nathan Wade as a witness, Nathan Wade's former law partner who testified, Ms. Yurdy. I mean, all of those people had a role in this. And instead of holding anyone accountable, McAfee has just become, I would refer to that as their enabler.
Well, I mean, it was just so obvious if you kept watching it. It was so obvious that they were lying. Not just the people who came forward. And there was even a waiter who came forward and had something to say that showed that they were lying. I mean, there were people who from all over, as they were watching the case, who called up and had experiences to talk about where they knew that they had lied. I don't think there was a question. In fact, to some degree, the judge admitted that they committed perjury in his statement, in his order. But he just ignored that. I mean, that in itself should be a reason for disbarment.
He needs to be removed from the case, no question about it, along with Fani Willis and Nathan Wade is now out. But and then this case just needs to go away. It's a witch hunt. I've told my listeners, they're sick of hearing it by now, but for 2.5 years, I helped Bob Shealy on a lawsuit that he brought against the Board of Elections in Fulton County. I've seen the evidence. I've seen it up close and personal. We estimate as many as 40,000 votes were stolen in Fulton County in the 2020 election. Yet here's Fani Willis saying that the people that are complaining about an election being stolen are the ones that are interfering with an election, when actually she is interfering with an election. That one being in 2024, she is trying to change the thoughts and minds of the voters in Fulton County and Georgia through this fictitious lawsuit, which is nothing really more than just out and out pure propaganda and a lie. And she's getting away with it. It is very discouraging. I mean, can you imagine? Now, this case has a lot of visibility. Everybody in America has been watching it. But can you imagine how evil this woman must be when she sets her sights on a target that is not well known and does not receive the attention that this case is getting? That's what I worry about. I worry about all the other people that she's trampled on.
Yes, that's certainly true. Absolutely, she should be removed, period. And the thing is, though, people get stuck not wanting to. A lot of people have expressed their disgust with the ruling and so on. But there are some people who don't, who want to keep it this way. And those are people who are against Trump. So they're kind of making it, this will, if she stays, then this will make it more likely that Trump will get indicted and so on. But it's not about that. It's not about Trump. It's about this woman being a DA and being allowed to be in this position and having such control over so many people's lives. It's not about Trump. It doesn't matter whether you like Trump or you don't like, don't like Trump. It's about, law and justice and keeping people who have ethics, in these kinds of high positions.
We're talking to Dr. Carol Lieberman, the terrorist therapist. I don't know why. That's a tongue twister. And also America's psychologist. She's the author of books including Bad Boys, How We Love Them, How We Live With Them. And
let me say it for you. You're kind of Bad Boys, Why We Love Them, How to Live With Them, and When to Leave Them. Bad Girls, Why Men Love Them, and How Good Girls Can Learn Their Secrets. Coping with Terrorism, and then my latest one, which is like super important for people to have right now. It's called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. And it's a book for children about terrorism and also their parents and teachers.
Well, we're coming to you on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Atlanta, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Nashville, Richmond, and Norfolk, and the entire state of West Virginia. So if you'd like to ask Dr. Lieberman a question or weigh in, feel free to call us at 804-778-8888, or you can go to getter.com right now and watch us live. And if you're there, I really would appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. And if you feel inclined, liking today's show, you have an opportunity to do that. And you can join over 1,000 people who are there right now interacting with us just on Getter. We're also on rumble.com, and you can also find us on YouTube Live right here and now. We're going to you live on each of those streaming services. And again, please consider subscribing and liking our show. It would mean a lot to us if you would do that. So, Dr. Lieberman, you were talking about Donald Trump. And my wife and I were very pleased and privileged to attend the Palm Beach County Republican Party Lincoln Day dinner last night at Mar-a-Lago. And President Trump was there. And we went as the guest of my good friend Amanda Shoemaker, who was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Palm Beach Republican Party last night. And she's just a wonderful, dedicated, hardworking lady that does not need to do it, but cares about our country, as do you and I and our listeners. And so she invited my wife and I. We had a great seat. We were right there up front. We saw Matt Gaetz speak. We saw Senator Rick Scott speak. He wants to be the next majority leader or the next leader, Republican leader in the U.S. Senate. I'm afraid that that's going to be a stretch because there are too many rhinos there. But anyway, Senator Scott is going to put his name in the hat to do that. Matt Gaetz gave just a great talk, and many other elected officials. It was a really nice evening. But I will tell you, Dr. Lieberman, I got to speak to the president briefly. He and I know each other. I've been in his presence a fair amount, and I appreciate him and his hard work so much. I just got to tell you, he did not look good to me last night. He was pale. He's lost weight. And I think that all of the torture that people have put him through the last 2 years is starting to show.
That's very unfortunate to hear. I mean, he has been put through the ringer in so many different ways. I saw his CPAC speech, and that was great. I mean, actually, I came in a little after it started. So I saw when I first came in, he was reading from the teleprompter. And I thought, oh, why is he doing that? This is going to be boring. But then he took over and just started talking. And he was so charming and funny. And I loved how he said this part about, he started a story and then he kind of went on to a different story. And he said, I know you people think that I'm not going to remember or get back to the first couple of stories, but I am. And he did. And, it was amazing how, at that point, he was really on his game. But I don't know how any human being.
He was on his game last night. He spoke for a good half hour. He hit all the points you would have expected him to: the southern border, inflation, our economy, the world order. My gosh, are we in a mess? Trump got us out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and told Rocket Man that if he didn't stop firing missiles, he was going to regret it. And he stood up to Xi and he stood up to Putin, right. But he also built relationships with them. But I've got so many friends that are liberals. I really didn't know they were liberals, but in conversation, it will come out, and they despise Trump. They despise him. They would call him a narcissist. Do you think President Trump is a narcissist?
He has some narcissistic traits, sure. But, he's not this one group of mental health professionals. In 2020, there was a group that came out led by this woman whose name I can't remember, trying to say that Trump, they're still trying to say that he has mental problems. Not so much, some people are trying to say dementia, but not really so much dementia as more narcissism, but they're calling it malignant narcissism, which is a very strong, severely ill type of, and there's no way that he has that. It's just, the real truth is, and I'll try to say it as politely as possible. But why some people are turned off by him is because he has BDE.
Okay.
Right.
That would lead me to ask, what is BED?
Oh, BDE.
BDE, I may have some, what do you call it?
Big D energy. Have you never heard that expression before?
I don't think I have.
Okay, well.
It must be a New York expression.
It basically means that he comes across very strongly, that he's a man. He's very masculine. He's very macho in a way, but not really towards women. He treats women well, but he intimidates men who don't have BDE, who don't feel secure in their masculinity. I'm trying to put it, as politely as I can. But so he intimidates people, especially men. Because they feel smaller. Okay, that's a good way to put it. They feel smaller as compared to him. And he has a lot of confidence. He has a lot of, and he says these things in a very strong kind of way. And the truth is that if we don't elect Trump in this next election, America is dead, is done. Because if we have 4 more, first of all, Biden, I have been saying actually since the 2020 election trying to warn people about Biden's dementia. I called it encroaching dementia. And it has certainly encroached a lot since then. And I don't know if he's even going to make it to November, but whether he makes it or he doesn't make it, or I mean, if there isn't someone, if Trump doesn't win, we are really done for, because this country is falling apart under the Democratic leadership, under the Obama Biden White House. It is really Obama that is the key to this whole problem, and he is pulling the strings behind the scenes, and we are, Trump is the only one who can save this country. I sincerely believe that.
I agree with everything you just said, and I called our current president, Joe Biden, as a connection to Obama. I think this is the Obama administration 3.0, and God save us if and help us if there's a 4.0. I don't think the nation can stand it. I think that if you look at everything that Biden has done, it seems to be intentionally done to bring our country down. Yes. And we can talk about that some more, but where does a oversized ego, where is the line between having a big ego and narcissism? To me, I have spent several hours with President Trump. He's never made me feel small. He's never talked down to me. In fact, he does just the opposite. He makes me feel good. He makes me feel important. He actually asks me what I think, and which is very flattering. And then I tell him as succinctly as I can, and we will sit there and have a conversation about it. So I'm
not saying that in real life, yes, one-on-one, that he makes people feel small. I'm saying people who are like looking at him on the television, or not one-on-one. I'm not saying he does that, like certainly not purposely, but it's just people who see him and he struts around. I mean, first of all, anyone who has the confidence to run for president. I mean, you can't run for president if you don't feel confident in yourself. And so there's some of that just comes from, people who want this. But the thing is, what's been keeping Trump alive, in a sense, keeping him hanging in there, is his love for America. And he has all these cases against him. And, it's amazing that he can string two sentences together. He has all these things that he's thinking about, all these worries, all these ways that people are trying to take him down. And yet it's his love for America that keeps him going.
So I guess, we could frame it. Which would you rather have? A president that has perhaps an oversized ego? Maybe there are elements of narcissism, or would you rather have a corrupt sociopath? And I truly believe that, I don't know in a clinical, technical sense whether Joe Biden is a sociopath, but I don't believe that I think Biden prefers to tell lies than the truth, when the truth would serve him just as well. I mean, so many things. I've just lost any confidence in Biden to tell us anything remotely resembling the truth on a wide range of issues.
Well, yes, it's when money is at stake. I mean, he has made so many lies over the years, even before he became president, just to make money. I mean, we know this story is kind of this story of Hunter Biden and Ukraine and all these other countries, and China, and it came out in the Post quite a while ago, and yet they have been able to keep a lot of these things under wraps. But now, now it's coming out a little more. But it's almost like too late, too little, too late.
Well, I mean, there's just so much baggage there. We know that he is corrupt. Jamie Comer and Jim Jordan, I think, have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's taken tens of millions of dollars from our adversaries, and they funneled them through these 20 limited liability corporations that make it very difficult to trace the money. Different family members have been rewarded with payments out of those LLCs. And then there's the seventh grandchild that he doesn't acknowledge. And the son who is a drug addict, a very dysfunctional family. I've said here before, I feel really bad for Hunter Biden. I had a dad who taught me right and wrong. If I got caught telling a fib when I was a little kid, I would go to the woodshed or I would go to my room, sit in the corner. There was a penalty for not telling the truth. And I've had a good role model as a mom and dad. Can you imagine having Joe Biden as your role model and having to be his son when the father makes you the bag man for the money?
Yes, obviously that does cause a lot of psychological dysfunction, but I don't want to blame it all on Joe. I mean, Hunter has surpassed being able to just blame it on Joe. And then, of course, we are led to believe that Bo was just perfect. So, I mean, there were a lot of dysfunction in Hunter's childhood and continuing. But I don't want to give him a pass. But, the thing is, people are, there have been polls, more and more polls, showing that more and more people recognize that Biden has dementia or is not fit to serve, however the different polls put it different ways. Certainly with Robert Herr's findings, I actually in 2022, I wrote an op-ed, an open letter to Biden, inviting him to take a cognitive test. I said that I would be happy to give it to him. Of course, I haven't heard anything from him. And other people have offered it too. He didn't hear, he just had his physical exam, annual physical. Of course, they didn't give him a cognitive exam because they knew he would fail. And so, the whole thing is, it would be like a movie, a parody, except for the fact that it's true.
Yeah. And this is a guy who has the nuclear codes.
Yes.
And he gets people's names confused and their roles confused. Yes. And he forgets things in mid-sentence. Yet he possesses the nuclear codes and is in charge of the defense of our country. I think it's very worrisome.
Well, don't worry. Obama has it too. I'm being sarcastic because Obama, who as a child was taught in madrasas, and there is no way that I would believe that, especially from all his actions over the years, that he has, what you learn as a child sticks with you more than anything you learn after that. And he basically has the radical Islamist belief system, which is why he is the way he is towards Israel, which is why he's trying to destroy America. All of these things he learned when he was a child, and you get rewarded. And also this month you get rewarded more during Ramadan for doing good acts. And some people radical Islamists believe that a good act would be, jihad. I just did a podcast about that, Ramadan jihad. I do a podcast called The Terrorist Therapist Show. And I was talking about how we all need to be really very concerned, not just Israel, but America and Western Europe. I mean, Western Europe, America, the mainstream media here does not cover what is happening in Europe, or certainly not to the extent they should be covering it. It has been taken over, including England. Did you recently the pro-Palestinians put on Big Ben, they projected from the river to the sea during a time when Parliament was supposed to vote on a ceasefire, whether you wanted that or you were going to, not that they were in control of it, but they were going to come across as either for it or against it. And those people, some of the MPs who were on Israel's side, basically, have been so terrorized by terrorists in England that they were afraid to vote in the way that would favor Israel. And there were mobs, of course. There are mobs of pro-Palestinians, and there are mobs in America too. It's a little worse right now in England and in Europe. But certainly there are mobs here, in the blocking the freeways, blocking the bridges, all of that. I mean, these people should be arrested. I'm all for speech, but not for things that they're doing.
Are you watching the truckers demonstrations in New York, and are they impacting your daily life? Are they being successful in interfering with commerce in New York City?
I'm born and bred in New York City, which is why I became the terrorist therapist, but I currently live in Los Angeles.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Well, Los Angeles is a nice place to live too, other than the government.
Yes, right.
Seems like to be a recurring theme that we're hearing these days. Well, we've got all these problems at home, and in the next half hour after at 1:00, I hope you will come back and maybe tune in. But we have Peter Schweitzer, who has written a book called Blood Money. It's a new book that he has written about the influence of communist China in the United States. He also wrote Red Handed a few years ago, which was a New York Times bestseller. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that interview. But he makes a very compelling case that we are in the clutches of China. Robert Spalding, who's been on our show, has said that in his book, Stealth War, that we are at war and that China has the real potential of taking our country over without a shot ever being fired. This is some scary stuff we're dealing with, Dr. Lieberman.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so true. They're between spy balloons and they have been, and coming across the border and all kinds of things. They have been waging a very slow, it's not like trying to take over America, by force or by guns but they've been very carefully, slowly doing it. And we need to wake up. There are so many things that we need to wake up to, and it includes, thinking that we should vote a Democrat in, but just so many things that we've been, people have been putting their heads in the sand because it's so scary. If you really think about what's going on, people feel helpless, especially, it didn't help to have the pandemic and lockdowns. That really caused people all over the world, but in America, to feel helpless. And we really need to find that American spirit, that original American spirit that helped us, make America great again, to help America make America to begin with. And we need to find it again to combat all of these things that are trying to take over.
Well, I think we need an independent leader who will go to Washington and do what Donald Trump said that he would do and pledges that he will do in his second term, and that is drain the swamp. I label it slightly differently. I say that we need a cleansing in America, that we need accountability for all the bad deeds that have occurred in the last 50 years, starting with Kennedy's assassination, which I absolutely believe the CIA conducted, covered up, and is still covering up, and the other atrocities that we've witnessed over the last 50 years, and hold the people accountable that have done these things and get back to a standard of truth in our country. And that should be the final arbiter of all decisions. Is we need to be able to rely on the truth. And that would mean that the media has to resume telling the truth. But we've been through many, many low points in our country, starting with the American Revolution to the Civil War to the World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Great Depression, the 2008 financial collapse in America. We always seem to muddle our way through it and to find a way to come out on the other side. I just pray and hope that we can do it again. I've never seen the stakes higher than they are right now.
I agree, but people need to work a little harder this time. I think we have accomplished those other things, but there are negative forces really trying hard to stop us this time. So everybody needs to reach down and get their courage, get their heart, find their patriotism again, and do something. Action.
Let us take a quick station break. I'm going to be right back, and thank you for coming on the show. We'll be back after this station break. And we are back. We're back live today in West Palm Beach, and we've got Andrea holding on from Georgia. Good afternoon, Andrea, and welcome to The Truth.
Oh, thank you, John. If Dr. Lieberman is still there.
I think we lost Dr. Lieberman. I think she thought I was saying goodbye, and I was really just saying we need to take a quick break. But anyway, Dr. Lieberman was a great interview. I so much enjoyed having her on the show, and I'm glad you were able to hear the interview.
Well, let me just offer one comment that perhaps if she's listening and you can pursue this, John, because it's so important. I was going to ask her, number one, about the psychological toll of injustice. But more importantly, the term narcissistic has been kicked around about President Trump so much. And from my training and so forth, narcissistic personality disorder is based on a person being a big nothing inside. So Narcissus looks in a pond and he's a big nothing, and his entire life is built around building a false image of himself. And that is not Donald Trump. He may have ego, he may have strength, but he is not a big nothing inside. He's the opposite. So I would love for this to be cleared up if you could have her back or pursue this. The definition of narcissism is being kicked around that is wrong.
Well, that was really the point that I was making with Dr. Lieberman, I believe, when I said, where does the line get blurred between an oversized ego and being a narcissist? And I think that I agree with you, Andrea. I think that people are confused, and they confuse those two things. I've known a lot of very, very successful people, and to a person, they have each had very large egos. And I just think that when you compete at the level that President Trump is competing at, or Tom Brady competes at on the football field, or pick somebody, a musician, I think they have an oversized ego. I think it's not a result of their success, but really a predictor of their success. And you just have to be very comfortable in your skin and feel very good about yourself in order to be able to operate at those levels. So, Andrea, thank you for calling. I want you to stay tuned. We've got Peter Schweitzer now. I had the pleasure of interviewing him earlier this week, so this will be a recorded segment. But Peter Schweitzer, as I mentioned, has authored two books. One is Red Handed, which came out about 4 or 5 years ago as the #1 bestseller list. And it chronicled all of the tentacles that China has into our country, from our corporations to our politicians to our institutions. And now we're seeing things that are just in your face. Military-aged men flooding the southern border from China, spy balloons that Dr. Lieberman talked about, a military base in Cuba, a spy station ostensibly, a military base in the Bahamas, all the things that you know about, that we've talked about here before, that China is demonstrating aggression toward our country, And Peter Schweitzer has nailed it. And then the most recent book, Blood Money, talks about the influx of fentanyl, the influx of arms, the co-opting of our politicians. It was a fascinating interview, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll play that interview for you now. My pleasure and honor to welcome Peter Schweitzer, a renowned investigative journalist, author, and the founder of the Government Accounting Institute, to the program today. Peter, welcome.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, as we talked before the segment, I read Red Handed, and it was beyond concerning when you read about the tentacles that the Communist China Party have, not just into our country, but into the institutions that are supposed to protect us and the people that are supposed to protect us. Do you want to talk just a little bit about what you uncovered in that book?
Yeah, in Red Handed, it was really about what the Chinese call elite capture. And the notion is pretty simple, right? If you want to get influence and steer the enemy, so to speak, just buy off their leaders. If you do that, you've won half the battle. So really, Red-Handed is about elite capture. That's their phrase. And they do it by seeking out commercial ties with the family members of political leaders in the United States. Very similar to the so-called princelings in China. These are the children of powerful political figures who have commercial deals. They're really applying the same strategy to the West. And they believe, and I think they're correct in this, that once you develop those commercial ties, you now have leverage, and you can use that leverage to, let's say, soften the position these American political leaders might have in their policy towards China.
Now, I had this question formulated for the end of the interview, but you've just led us directly into it. Do you think there's a countervailing power there, though? I mean, while we look defensively at all the influence that the Communist China Party has in our country, I'm of the suspicion, at least, a little bit of a belief, that we've got some pretty significant power where they're concerned, too. I mean, both countries are kind of joined at the hip at this point to some extent, aren't they?
They are. I mean, look, our entire policy towards China, the opening up of China, was not just about commercial relations. It was predicated on the notion that the more that we embrace them commercially, the more they'll become like us. That was the assumption. Now, it hasn't worked out that way, and part of the reason it hasn't worked out that way is because they have a dictatorial system. The Chinese Communist Party makes the decision, not the general public, not the business community that perhaps is tied to the CCP out of convenience, not out of conviction. So that makes our plan a lot harder to execute. If you have a small cadre of people running the country who are not elected, who are not accountable to the general public, it's very, very hard to penetrate that. Especially when you have a figure like Xi, who really wants to return China to kind of the ideological convictions of the Mao era, much more so than the kind of freewheeling 1990s China that we're familiar with.
Well, it seems to be really complicated by two things. One is that one of your colleagues, General Robert Spalding, colleague meaning that he is also an author, he has written a book called Stealth Warfare, and he was a guest on our show. He says point blank that we are at war, and that China is out to take our country over, and that he believes that they will do it without ever firing a shot. And that is a scary proposition. When you sit back from 30,000 feet and you look at all the things that are going on, spy balloons floating over our country, spy stations being erected in Cuba, military bases being erected in the Bahamas. We know that fentanyl is just flooding across our southern border, and there's enough here to kill every citizen of America. And the other things that you bring into your new book, which is called Blood Money, which I'm almost finished with. I'm going to finish it before I go to bed tonight because it is a fascinating book. But talk to us about the things that you feel that are direct threats and provocations against our country that you enumerate in that book. We can start with fentanyl.
Yeah, well, you know, China wants to defeat the United States without actually having to fight us. They want to tear us apart. They want to corrode us internally. They have a doctrine called disintegration warfare, and that's really what this is about. It's fragmenting American society. Fentanyl, of course, is a key component of that. I think a misconception that a lot of people have is they feel like this is a Mexican drug cartel operation. The drug cartels are really the junior partners here. This is a Chinese-run operation. The precursor chemicals come from China. People, of course, know that. But when those precursor chemicals are made into fentanyl in a northern town in Mexico, there are actually 2,000 Chinese nationals in that town in northern Mexico who are creating the fentanyl for the cartels. When the cartels create the pills, because, of course, people that are dying of fentanyl overdoses don't know they're actually taking fentanyl. It's a poisoning. Those pill presses that the cartels use are provided by China. When the drug cartels communicate amongst themselves to distribute the drugs in the United States, they use Chinese-based apps and communication devices because they know China won't share those communications with U.S. law enforcement. And the final component is the Mexican drug cartels, they need to launder this money, right? You've got all this money. Well, in the days of when it was mostly heroin and cocaine, they laundered that money in Latin American banks. Now they launder it in Chinese state-owned banks, and they often use Chinese students in the United States on education visas to do so. So the bottom line is this is a Chinese operation. The cartels are the junior partner, and it is the leading cause of death among Americans under the age of 45.
Well, you make the point in your book that the average life expectancy in America is actually in decline because of the repercussions from fentanyl.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool and weapon. And there are other drugs, carfentanil, and some of these drugs that are used by veterinarians to sedate large mammals. Those are now being produced in China, being given to the drug cartels. So fentanyl is just the beginning. There is more potent stuff around the corner. And this is really, in the eyes of Beijing, a return, a revenge for the opium wars of the 19th century.
Well, this is not the stuff of conspiratorialists. This is real factual based. And when I ran for office in Georgia last year, I went all over the state. And I can say with almost without exception, at every campaign stop, a mom or a dad would come up to me and tell me that they had lost a child to fentanyl.
Yeah.
And it is truly an epidemic. And the thing that disturbs me the most about it is that there are notable exceptions like Maria Bartiromo, who we were talking about earlier, and some other people on Fox, but largely the mainstream media is completely silent on it.
They don't want to talk about it, and it's really is truly shocking because, again, the people that are taking fentanyl, that are dying from it, don't know they're taking it. This is not like somebody who's addicted to heroin who is shooting up and killing themselves or overdosing because they need a bigger hit. This is really a poisoning. And China laughs at the United States in our response. The Biden administration, of course, says that, well, we put sanctions on Chinese officials that are involved in the fentanyl trade. There was one gentleman named Wan who they put sanctions on in 2021. 3 months later, the Chinese government gave him an award. And he gave a fiery speech about how he was doing what he was doing to help China in its battle against the United States. So they laugh at this. And the bottom line, I'm convinced, is Joe Biden does not want to talk about this because his family is entangled with elements indirectly linked to the trade. So, the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, they are the kings of fentanyl. They pump more of this poison into the United States than anyone else. There's a Chinese gang named UBG that set them up in the fentanyl trade. Everybody acknowledges that. The head of that gang is a guy who goes by the name White Wolf. In 2017, the Bidens received a $5 million forgivable interest-free loan from his business partner, a loan that they've never repaid.
So Hunter got a $3.5 million diamond, I believe he reported.
Yeah, and
that's
exactly.
a little tidbit too.
Exactly.
I don't want to talk about Biden's age and his competency any longer.
Right.
To me, I view that as a smokescreen masking the real issue, which is their corruption.
Yes.
And I had dinner with Ted Cruz a few months ago, and I said, I don't want to see us impeach Biden. I want to see us charge him with treason because I think he has sold us out, and he's allowed, we let a spy balloon float over our country, hover over our nuclear bases, and then shoot it down after the mission is complete.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Yeah, no, he is incapable, again, I think because of entanglements and corruption, he's incapable of confronting China. On fentanyl, he says, I've raised the issue with President Xi, but no finger pointing. You have to finger point. They're the culprits, and yet he's not capable of doing so.
Meanwhile, we've got thousands of military-age fit Chinese people crossing our southern border, along with God only knows who else. People from terroristic nations we know have been intercepted. But the real concern, in addition to that, is that, as you say in your book, there are arms that are being brought in to the country.
Yeah, this is part of the disintegration warfare, the destabilizing of the United States. Beginning in 2018, China started smuggling into the United States these small devices, highly illegal. They're called auto sear switches or Glock switches. If you insert it into a Glock handgun, it turns that Glock handgun into a machine gun. And you put a 50-round magazine on that, and you've got a machine gun, you've got superior firepower to the police. This started happening in 2018. According to our federal authorities, the Chinese particularly marketed these to criminal gangs and drug dealers in the United States. So it was designed specifically to go to the most violent criminal element in the United States. So what do we have happening in America today? Something we haven't seen since Al Capone in the 1930s. We hear machine gun fire in urban America again in a major way. And what China does is they run articles in their state media saying, look at how terrible things are in America. There's machine gun fire. What, of course, they neglect to mention is they're the ones that actually armed these criminals with these devices in the first place.
Well, then you also go on to talk about the riots in 2020.
Yeah.
And I think you suspect that it's more than what just meets the eye. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned.
Yeah, I think there's clear evidence. 2020, the BLM protests. I think also some of the violent, radical pro-Hamas protests we're seeing now really emanate from two small, violent groups. So in 2020, you had people that came out that protested. They saw the situation with George Floyd. They were concerned about race relations in America. They went out and protested. What these groups, FRSO and PSL, did was said, no, we're going to radicalize the conversation. We're going to say all cops are racist. We need to abolish the police, and we need to take extreme measures. And they engaged in very, very disruptive behavior. Well, who are FRSO and PSL? These are pro-Beijing groups that have pledged their allegiance to the CCP. We know that funds reach these groups indirectly through China-based billionaires that are funding their activities, and we know that China tracks the activities of these groups and reports favorably on them. I actually quote from them in the book. So this is an extension of this disintegration warfare. You have the fentanyl, you have the violence with the guns, and you have chaos in the streets. This is a trademark example of disintegration warfare.
Scary stuff. And in the news right now, the United States Congress, the House of Representatives, is looking at a ban of TikTok, or at least demanding that the Chinese divest their interest in TikTok. Do you have faith that there's anything substantive that's really going to come from that?
I'm hoping that they will force the sale of TikTok. I'm not sure you can ban it because something else will emerge. But the notion that we're going to allow the CCP to control this device, as I highlight in the book, ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, they do joint research with the Chinese Ministry of State Security on how to manipulate people on social media. This is what they do. I quote extensively in the book from Chinese military officials talking about how this is a Trojan horse they're using against us. They're manipulating our young people. So I think we need to force the divestiture of it. Certainly if it's run by an American tech company, there can be more supervision, more regulation, more control of what they're doing. But as long as it's run by the CCP, this is going to be a tool of manipulation, and it's working. You look at what's happening to young people. It's part of cognitive warfare, as Beijing calls it, and it is a highly effective tool in damaging young people in America.
Well, as if we aren't disturbed enough about what the relationship is with China today, you maintain that Hollywood has also been infiltrated and corrupted along the way.
Yeah, and they kind of willfully did it. People like Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg struck deals with China, where China invested in their businesses. But the deal was China gets to influence and determine what the content is, not just of films in China, but films in the United States. And you can take a children's series like Kung Fu Panda. The first two were sort of good, basic, typical American stories. Kung Fu Panda 3 was funded partly by Beijing, completely different storyline, and it emphasized what they call core Chinese socialist values, in their words. And you can look at major blockbuster films like Transformers, The Martians, others, all of them that get co-financed by China end up with these pro-CCP messages, and it's an enormous problem.
So let's talk about COVID before we run out of time completely here. When COVID arose, it almost seemed surreal to me. I just intuitively, I did not totally buy into this, the narrative and the versions that were being talked about with COVID. And Anthony Fauci said, oh, it was manufactured or the product of a bat cave or a bat in a market at 2 hours away from Wuhan. And then we learned, oh no, actually it did come from the Wuhan lab. I don't think any person in the world today doesn't believe that it came from Wuhan.
Right.
President Trump has called it the China virus since the inception. And the question that I have not resolved in my own mind is whether it was intentionally released or whether it was unintentional. Do you have any data, facts, or even an assumption on it?
I'm going to assume right now that it was accidental, but what I point out in the book is they knew in November of 2019 what they were dealing with. They knew that this virus existed. They knew that it was transferable from person to person. They did not alert the world to that till the end of January. So they basically had almost 3 months where they had this secret information they weren't sharing with anybody. What did they do? They cornered the market on PPE supplies, the K95 masks that medical personnel used treating them. They cornered the market on that. And so when they finally alerted the rest of the world, they had basically a monopoly on all of it. Not only just that it's produced there, but they bought it up from the rest of the world. There were other things they did in addition to that to maximize the body count in the United States. So I think that's the thing we really need to understand here. Yes, I believe it was a lab leak. It could have been intentional, but their entire focus during this time period was coming up with ideas and executing them that maximize the body count in the United States to ensure that more people died, not less. And that's really what I focus that section on the book on.
Well, I'm right where you are. It's just impossible for me to believe that any human being could be so callous as to unleash something that could take tens of millions of lives worldwide. So I'm in your corner in terms of believing that it was unintentional. I want to believe that, but I'm open to receiving information to the contrary because I do have my concerns.
Well, I'll tell you a story that I mentioned in the book, that is, I think, apropos here. President Xi reveres his father. His father was a high-ranking CCP official. He built a large mausoleum in honor of his father. One of his father's most famous acts was as a 14-year-old boy trying to poison and kill his teacher because he was not sufficiently revolutionary. So if he reveres a man who took actions like that and revered that action, I would not put it past President Xi to engage in that kind of behavior, to poison people as part of a political advantage.
Well, and we just know culturally that the people in China, or at least the leadership, don't put the value of human life in the same compartment that we do in the Western world. And we see atrocities against our own people. Well, it has been a fascinating time to spend with you. I really appreciate your coming on the show. Before we leave, have we got some solutions? One thing that I've noticed that gives me hope, that Christopher Wray has said, I've watched him testify 2 or 3 times, and has said, and I'm not quoting him exactly, but that he considers China to be the greatest threat that we have as a nation. That recognition alone gives me some hope that the FBI and hopefully the other intelligence agencies and defense agencies in our country are aware and working on it. What's your crystal ball show you?
Yeah, I'm encouraged by some things. I'm discouraged by others. But yes, I see the momentum is starting to shift. People are realizing what China is doing. They realize that certain political figures have these entanglements, so they don't listen to what they say as much as they should. good. That includes some Republicans as well. And I feel like there is a sense in the country that some of the disruptions that we are seeing are not just our internal problems. They are internal problems that are being magnified and enhanced by the CCP.
Peter Schweitzer, the author of Red Handed and his brand new book out, Blood Money. Thank you, Peter. It has just been a pleasure and an honor to be able to spend some time talking to you, and I hope you will come back soon and often, and we can continue to follow this story. This is The Truth. We're telling you the truth, and I'm John Gordon. And we are back live now from West Palm Beach. That was Dr. Peter Schweitzer, an author, and has written 2 fabulous books on China and the threat that they pose to our country. I also want to thank Dr. Carol Lieberman for coming on today, the terrorist therapist and America's psychiatrist. She is a very smart lady living now in Los Angeles and practicing in California there. We have a lot to be concerned about. We have a lot to be thankful for, and we have to work hard to preserve this great republic that so many people gave their lives to create and defend and preserve. I think we are at a time that all of us have to do what we can, where we can, to work in a constructive way to help our nation. So that is The Truth today. I hope you've enjoyed the program. We'll be back next Saturday for more truth telling. I'm John Gordon. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. So long.